I keep wanting to say this morning, I'm living a little bit in the past. The last 2 days has been a bit of a blur to me, but it's always so blessed to get together with brothers and sisters in the Lord, mainly the brothers who are brothers in arms, in the ministry, and here to be refreshed. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Okay, all right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me for this breakout session at this time. I want to say that this is the graveyard shift. You have to know it. Anything after lunch is just downhill, and that's in a negative way. I want to say, because this is now where the carbs start kicking in and all that. So I know we were warned this morning against theatrical preaching, but I may have to bring some out just to keep some of you awake, if that's all right. Okay. Well, before we get into the Word of God this afternoon, let's open in a word of prayer. We'll bow our heads and close our eyes and devote this time to our Lord. Father, thank you for this time, Lord. Thank you for these 2 days that we could spend together as brothers, even accompanied by our wives, some of these brothers. Lord, thank you for orchestrating this, Lord, bringing these men from overseas, from America, to come serve us the Word. Thank you for their loving messages unto us, Lord, to serve us, to aid us in the ministry. And Lord, we also pray that we will leave this conference with the desire to apply these things in our lives. Oh Lord, we know that it is one thing to hear the Word, but it is quite another to be actual doers of the Word. I pray, Lord, that you will help me as I try to explain the topic that is before us this afternoon. And Father, I pray that it won't be my opinion. Lord, may I get out of the way, and may it be your word that is taught. We pray these things in Jesus' name alone. Amen. So for what it's worth, and I've said this to a few brothers before, I kind of feel like a medic who's been drawn into the trench and been given a machine gun to shoot. That's kind of my analogy for being a speaker here at the Shepherds Conference. I'm more on the medic side. I don't know how a gun. No, I'm teasing. I should know how a gun works. But I'm an unlikely speaker here today, so hopefully you don't have your hopes too high. But I'm here because I do believe that the message that I'm about to share with you this afternoon is of great importance. And this is something that the church at large should be able to agree to. And I want to reiterate by saying, we live in a day and age that it is not uncommon for households to be in disarray. When I say households in disarray, what I'm referring to is, the roles have been reversed in many situations. I think in some way, and not that my parents are horrible examples of this, but in some way or another, many of us grew up in homes where it wasn't uncommon for mom to be out 8 to 5 every day, Monday to Friday, some even a Saturday. So, but I want to say straight off the bat, I don't think that's the biblical view of the role of a woman. I don't think that is our Lord's desire for His very particular design of a woman. And when I say design, it really comes down to that. The Lord designed men in a way to tick in a certain way, and the same is true of our woman. And when we get those things confused, and when we get those disjointed, then I want to say society at large does not function as it should. It doesn't. Now I know, there are those who say, yeah, but it's true that, the world is in the hands of the devil anyways. And yes, we get some of that flavor from John, for instance, that, the things in this world is not of the Father in a sense, because it represents things that are evil and dubious and debauched, and that might be true in some way or another. However, I do believe that it will affect society positively if more and more Christian families can step to the plate and actually hone in on the roles. And it is often when the nuclear family, and it has nothing to do with science, nuclear, right? That central aspect of society, the nuclear family, right? The nucleus of society. If that is gone, if it's gone amok, then the rest will go amok. It goes without saying. So this, I want to say this morning again, because I'm still in yesterday, right? So I think without further ado, I want to introduce you to the origin of the problem that we're sitting with in many of our churches. And I know, we want to concede that many of us here come from good churches, or we represent good churches. We're pastors who represent good churches. And I say good churches with good statements of faith, where there are a good set of elders who are actually doing what they should be doing biblically. But even for us, I want to say there's this constant pressure to want to be okay with what society at large is saying is okay about the family. And we've got to be careful about that. I mean, I don't have to stand here and convince you or try to convince you that the LGBT thing is wrong. Everybody's already convinced. Honestly, I don't think there's a single person here who's gonna be like, no, I disagree, sir. I don't think so. That's why you're here. All right. So in a sense, I am preaching to the choir, but this, I want to say, can be a holy cow in our churches, and it can become a holy cow when our women are not living up to that role which the Lord has very, very specifically carved out for them, and something that you, my friend, you're not going to be able to fulfill that. Your wife is the one who's going to have to fulfill that role. Sadly, in history, and it's not even so long ago, what I'm talking about has been ridiculed in society. And it started with the development of the feminist movement. Some of you might know something or a few things about this already. But the reason why we are dealing with this tension in our churches is largely because of the effects that feminism or its development has had in the world at large. If you want to look at the fact that many women today, and I'm not talking about Christian women specifically, many women are delaying pregnancy, they're delaying becoming moms. It's largely the results of the feminist movement. Now, a quick word on the feminist movement. Feminism developed in the world in two distinguishable waves. The first wave, some believe, started as long ago as the 15th century. I'm not sure, exactly what happened then, but I do know that it was around the 20th century that it started receiving a lot more impetus. For instance, this is where, and by the way, as I'm saying this, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But it started by, for instance, challenging the status quo. Back in the day, for instance, in early 20th century, women in England were not allowed to vote. I don't know if you know that. That's where the suffragettes were born. They were the ones who protested. Who of you remember the movie Mary Poppins? All right, my kids love it. You'll remember the mother, right? They would be marching through the house, singing their songs. That was the suffragettes, right? They had this political agenda to be emancipated from that, whatever they saw as a paternalistic, draconian rule. That's how they viewed it. And yes, in a sense, I was like, look, guys, I could have seen this is coming if you don't allow a woman to vote. All right, you basically, you're exasperating them in a sense. So I'm not saying anything about that, but I am saying that this is how this developed in the world. It started with challenging certain things. Back in those days, it was even improper for some ladies to eat at the same table as their husbands. That was weird times. Okay, in England and in other parts of Europe. Think about Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. She writes as a protester of that kind of society that they had to live in, where a wife had to address her husband not by his first name, but by his surname, Mr. So-and-so. was a little bit weird in certain ways. But then again, that is not the definition of biblical masculinity or biblical femininity. That's not it at all. Definitely not. The Bible has a very particular view as to how it pertains to the roles. But anyway, that's how these things developed. But it wasn't until the second wave of feminism, this is now after the suffragettes, that a certain woman by the name of Betty Friedan wrote her all-important treatise against this paternalistic society that the world is subjected to, named The Feminine Mystique. And I'm going to quote you from the Feminine Mystique, because this was a groundbreaking work in the development of these things. She says in her book, and I quote, she says, by the way, now you're going to get a flavor for the disdain that they had for the way that the roles were specified or defined in those days. She says, quote, each suburban wife struggles with it alone. Quite poetic, right? Listen. As she made the beds, shopped for groceries, matched slipcover material, ate peanut butter sandwiches. That's nice. I like that. Anyway, ate them with their children, chauffeured Cub Scouts and brownies, lay beside her husband at night. She was afraid to ask even of herself the silent question, is this all? End quote. You see, so it starts with that attitude of, this is horrible. This is a horrible existence. To be a homemaker, in other words. This is, could this be the be-all and end-all? But that said, of course there were a lot of abuses. Of course we know that. Of course there were husbands who beat their wives. Of course there were husbands who drank. Of course there were husbands who, did not live according to the way that God expected them to live. But still, you can hear that the heart attitude which is betrayed here is not the attitude that the Bible calls our women to model in their lives. And we're going to get to some of those passages later in this lecture. That was from The Feminine Mystique, right? Now this is I want to say, what motivated so many women to forego motherhood, to forego pregnancy, to forego being workers at home, and to enter the workforce en masse. I want to say this is how these things started being motivated or promoted in the world. This is largely what led to what I like to call an estrogen army, hitting up our offices in industry, in the world, because they were told that to be a mom or to be somebody who takes care of people in her own household, that's a demeaning job. That's not a good thing. That is an insult to your talents, ladies. That's what Betty Friedan was trying to teach these young ladies. And by the way, they hung on her very words. They were totally captured by her. But again, that's not the view of Scripture, and we'll get into that. This eventually gave rise to the church at large, and I'm not saying churches like ours, but many churches accepting this, introducing this in their understanding of Scripture, which led to the view of egalitarianism. Egalitarianism, plainly stated, there really is no discrepancy between the roles. A woman can be a breadwinner, she can be the leader of the household, and a man can be a worker at home. He can be. And by the way, many American sitcoms would poke fun at that at times. I don't know if you remember the famous sitcom Who's the Boss? I don't know if you remember that. Tony Maselli, right? Okay, he was the worker at home basically, and the lady, she was the fancy executive who drove the fancy car, and and that was an obvious, I want to say, portraying of that worldview which Betty Friedan was also propagating. But even before that, the suffragettes, and even those people in the 15th century. But I want to say it's even older than that. But we'll get into that. All right. So egalitarianism, right? A guy can do a woman's job and a woman can do a man's job, or at least stand in those roles. That is basically what it comes down to. And if you read guys like Wayne Grudem, he would even go a step further. He would say it's exactly egalitarianism that gives impetus to the LGBTQI, RST, and all the rest. Because the moment you can say that a woman can be an elder of a church or a pastor, then you should also be able to say that a guy can marry a guy, or a woman can marry a woman. He makes that argument in one of his books. I think it is entitled Feminism or something like that. I forget now.
Evangelical feminism.
What is it called?
Evangelical feminism.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I've
Yeah.
heard it all.
Right. And by the way, this is not a one-way street, so thank you for speaking. I should have said that in the beginning. This is not a sermon, this is a lecture, right? And the definition of a lecture is the lecturer can be interrupted, all right, with either a question or a comment. Please note tomatoes, that's why we have this here, for me to duck and evade those. All right, so any questions up to this point or comments? Did you get that? Evangelical feminism. Go ahead, sir. Yes.
Interested in what was the date of that of Betty's?
Oh gosh, yeah. That was. Did I even write it down? Hang on.
Was it between the 19?
It was 1963 that she published that book. Yeah. So by the way, and it makes sense, doesn't it? Because the swinging 60s. Some of us blush when we think about what we were doing in the 60s. That doesn't include me. I was not born yet. Okay. So the 60s. You look at how certain things, certain ways of thinking start in Europe, in the universities in Europe. Eventually, those same ideas get spread across the Atlantic, and they land in American hands and in American universities. And the next thing you know, you have a sexual revolution on your hands. And honestly, the poets of the sexual revolution, they were not even as extreme as the hippies themselves became. So often those who think about these things and who toy with these ideas do not end up as extreme as the followers do. But such is life in a fallen world. So, but anyway, that's a bit of a history of what we're dealing with here. And I'd like to say that we are people from different walks of life, and I know that the Lord saved us each out of a certain context, and there are certain things that we were exposed to in our upbringing, and things that we just thought was like, this is just how it is. Mom is somebody who gets up and goes to work. I totally understand it, and I want to be sympathetic to that. And look, there's also those, I want to say, those very special circumstances where it is necessary for a woman to pick up the slack where her husband is slacking off. I understand that, but that's not what I'm talking about today. Because I know maybe some of you are tempted now. It's not a temptation. You are driven to want to ask me about some of these exclusions. And I want to say that's not what I'm doing here this afternoon. I mainly want to see this as a forum to motivate our older women and our young ladies to uphold this in their lives and to model this. And we'll get to that text in Titus 2, because honestly, Paul presents it as a role of the older woman to model it to the younger ladies. But it has to start with someone. So whether it is the pastor preaching it or the older woman actually doing it, somebody's going to have to start doing it. And I say this as a credible source. I'm a pastor of a church in Stellenbosch Bible Church. And if you know anything about Stellenbosch, it's a very, very ambitious town. Super ambitious. They excel at being ambitious. All the way from academics to sport. It's a very competitive environment, Stellenbosch. And we see it. We see some of the girls who come our way, who we do believe the Lord saves, and they're saved without doubt by grace through faith. But there's this nudge to want to keep on competing with the world and against the world, and to make it big in career or in an in some or other vocation. So it is actually, me as a pastor having thought about them that motivated me to pick this up with you, but also for you to take it to your congregations, and motivate your ladies to do the same. So that's why this is important for us all. Now the following involves what Scripture has to say about the major roles of our wives, or role of our wives. And let me just say, this is especially practical in how we as pastors or elders, and wives of elders, please don't tune out, because you can help your husband in this. In fact, I have a great wife. Her name's Anna, and she reminds me all the time of ladies that need instruction. She does it herself, indeed, right? But you get that, like, so and so needs to be talked to in love, because we see these things in her life, or we see this trend or that trend. So the wives can be invaluable as it involves this, because often our men, we think high priority things. We're thinking, are we preaching orthodoxy here? Are we evading heresy? Like big things. That's the level where I operate. And then my wife comes along, so and so has done that, and like, why is that important? Because yes, that's why this is important. See, are they on the right trajectory as young ladies? That's what we want to make sure about. Are they unnecessarily delaying motherhood because of some secular voice that has been whispering into their ears? This is what we want to address, and this is what makes it very practical. Any questions up to this point? Any comments? Go ahead, sir. Yes.
So could we say that a failure of biblical masculinity has led to the rebellion of biblical femininity?
It can. Yes, I think so. That's a sermon on its own, I think. Yeah. That's maybe 5 lectures on its own. So definitely, if there's a lack of proper male leadership, then sure, the ladies may not be held in check as they should, in love, obviously. So, but even in the absence of male leadership, take an Elizabeth Elliot, for instance. She went to the Alcaenians. She took one guy, I think she taught him the gospel. He got saved. He took it to the rest of the tribe. Because she was so serious about not exercising authority over a man. There's different ways in which one can interpret that, of course. But often, I think the ladies need to hear this. Honestly, because I think they can have a closer rapport with other ladies in the church, much better than us men can have, much better. In fact, I try and avoid counseling with women as far as I can. Honestly, there is nothing that makes me more nervous than that. My wife is always present when that happens, always. And if not, like, it'll be like in a public place in our church, in our house, where my wife is walking around doing things, maybe tending to the children, if she can't sit in on a session. But either way you slice it, I think this is a call for ladies unto ladies, but something which our elders need to facilitate, and we got to be mindful of that in our churches, and we got to ask some very poignant questions about that. Is this happening? Is this happening? Are we encouraging our young ladies in the right direction, in God's direction? Okay, so yeah, good, helpful observation. Anybody else? No. Okay. So I've already mentioned society a few times, and I think I want to point out that here are some things that are being taught to our young ladies, like that voice that I said, that secular voice that whispers in their ears. Stuff like this, for instance, a woman can become anything she wishes, right? Like, how many ladies have heard that? Oh, you can become anything you want to be. And by the way, by asking this question or by presenting this to you, I'm not doubting the fact that some ladies are amazingly gifted in many ways. I'm not doubting that fact. In fact, my wife runs circles around me intellectually. She makes me believe I'm wrong every time. Okay? She's a master at that. Okay? Truly gifted. Stop the recording right there. Okay. Okay. She has amazing talents, which I will never possess, and that is certainly true of every woman sitting here right now. But again, we're going to get to that. I don't think that necessarily entails that they are all actually fulfilling the role that God has hand selected for each of them. All right. Yes, you might be an amazing scientist. All right. But if you're a Christian and you're a lady, your highest responsibility is to do that which God has called you to do. We'll get into the biblical data as we're talking about that. So okay, so no, it's obvious then to Christians, no, a woman should not try and seek to be anything she wants to be. No, right? Because there's a specific conscription, we'll get to that the Lord has assigned to them. How about this one? Maybe you've heard this one. More women are needed in the workforce to balance out the men. Okay, there's more ladies needed in the workforce because the office can be so chauvinistic, and maybe it shows in society in certain ways. Maybe you've heard that one before. Or how about this one? And not really becomes more obvious that this is not the way of our Lord. Okay, how about this one? Women should delay marriage to focus on a career path. In other words, intentionally delaying marriage because she wants to go do that or this or this. And I want to say oftentimes frivolous things like, I want to go travel in Europe first and then, this and that. And I have nothing against traveling in Europe, honestly. And the time might present itself. But again, how does that chalk up against what God wants for your life if you're a Christian woman? Or let me say it this way. What is the noblest of desires as it involves God's calling on your life? Right? Here's a last one. Again, as the world might see it, women should delay motherhood to focus on those careers which they did choose for themselves. So delay motherhood, delay it as far as possible, because once children are in the picture, then you are snookered. Then it is game over. Then you are blocked, and there is no more fun, there is no more joy, because children are there. That's a very pessimistic view on children, I would say. And again, totally devoid of the true biblical worldview. So without further delay, here follows the scriptural view of the role of wives. And I want to specify by saying that these are biblical reasons that can be seen as motivation for us as men and older ladies or younger ladies who are wise beyond their years to encourage daughters, wives, the daughters of congregants, of members of our churches, of elders, of any of these lassies, for them to model a culture as being workers at home. And that's the biblical calling. Titus 2. There's no two ways about it. So for this purpose, let's look at the cruciality, the calling, the conscription, and the commendation of being a worker at home. Let me repeat that to you if you are taking notes this afternoon. We're going to look at the cruciality of being a worker at home, the calling of being a worker at home, the conscription of being a worker at home, and then lastly, the commendation of being a worker at home. So starting off with the cruciality of being a worker at home. What does it mean if something, by the way, that's not a very normal way of saying the word crucial, right? Usually it's crucialness, I think. I'm not English, that's not my first language. Ek's 'n boer, okay, kaki, boss, whatever you want to call me, clutch plate. I don't mind it, I've heard it all. But I did look it up, and Mr. Google did allow for cruciality, okay, because it fits with all my C's. That's why I chose it. So what is it if something is crucial? All ye English speakers. This is an easy one. Go ahead.
Very important.
Very important. It's crucial, right? Is ice cream crucial? Yes. Yes. It is crucial. Okay? A world without ice cream is horrible. Okay, so we get it, right? Crucial. If something is crucial, it means it is indispensable. It is absolutely necessary, what I'm talking about here. And I want to say it is crucial, right? It is crucial for our woman to have the proper roles in check, because the first line of defense, I want to say, against Satan starts in the crib. That's where it starts. That's the first line of defense. Those of you who signed up, I didn't sign up. I didn't have to because I was a speaker here. It feels weird. But I still got some books, which is great. And one of the books is John MacArthur's The War on Our Children. It's a war. I agree. I haven't read the book yet, but I'm itching to get to it. It's an absolute hostile war against our children these days. And not as if it's new. It's no new innovation of Satan. It's always been like that. But maybe the last decade or so, it's gotten quite ridiculous, really. To the point where if your kid at school uses the wrong pronoun for a fellow pupil, you could be talking about a court case. That's the world that we're living in these days. Not too long ago, there in Somerset West, in our valley, that side, there was exactly this kind of case, in a school called Beaumont Primary. And there was, I think, a girl who wishes to be a boy and who wished to be called by certain pronouns or whatever. And the rest of the kids obviously did not get it because, in their innocence, kids don't get this. They honestly do not. I think that's the first evidence that it's just so wonky, right? And they wouldn't call her as a he or a whatever. And then the parents sued the school. But they won the case. That's what makes it so ridiculous. They actually won it. So I want to say, as a first line of defense, we're going to need mothers to raise our children. Not just them, obviously. Of course, dads are called to raise kids as well. But it goes without saying, the first few years of a child's development, the mom plays a very central role. I don't care who you are. That's in any society. It's how it is. But sadly, so many of us are being, taken, as soon as we're out of nappies, like we get taken to the daycare, which is horrible. That's a horrible world to be raised in. And a lot of the times, it's because parents are trying to keep up with the Joneses. That's why. Mom has to work because they want the second car and they want the holiday home by the beach and they want. So I know. It says there, in a challenging economy. Maybe that's false advertising. That was my kind of that's how I'm going to get them to come listen to me. All right? Because I honestly do not have the answer to that. It's a challenging economy, I agree. It's tough as nails, I agree. And here we are, and we're in a third world, and it just gets harder and harder and harder. But I want to say, it's still no reason. It's still no reason to drop our kids off at a daycare. 5 days a week, 12 months in the year. After 6 years, they've been raised by other people. They've been influenced by other people. How can Christian parents do that? I think that's a crime against humanity. You're talking about crimes against humanity. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train a child up according to his way, even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Proverbs 22:6. And I know there'll be some of you who are very theologically minded who would say, yeah, but this is from the wisdom books. Yes, I know it's from the wisdom books. I understand that much. So these aren't necessarily precepts that we're reading here, all right? And I would agree to that. But however, since we're talking about wisdom, wisdom dictates that if you do nudge a child in a certain direction, then it stands to reason that that child will start getting more and more solidified in that course of action. The Muslims even know that. Have you ever heard the Muslims? They say, give a child to us for the first 6 years of their lives and they'll be a Muslim for life. They boast about that, by the way. Because they know something about the development of a child. But Christians seem to have forgotten that. And often, sometimes these parents are very, very, very zealous about evangelism, and they sign up for every outreach and every this and every that. But it starts in the home. The very first people you are responsible to reach out to and present Christ to and evangelize to are those in your own image. Those little people who look like you and speak like you. And sadly, sometimes start to sin like you. Right? But it's true. Train up a child according to his way, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. This is not a promise. Some theologians have said this is a promise. I don't read this as a promise. I don't think there's a guarantee for our children. I don't think so. But again, logic dictates. Expose them to the Word of God. Expose them to proper Christian living. Expose them to a proper example early, and maybe by God's grace, they will become believers eventually. That's the point. That's what we're talking about. Just to explain this verse to you, the way, has been debated here often. What way is in mind here? Is it the way of God, or is it just any way? And I know it can be a tough exegetical debate, but whichever way you see it, all should agree that every Christian has it in their power, and it's a God-given power, I want to say, to influence their children rightly for Christ early, before it's too late. But I want to say it's obviously never too late until death. Right? There are cases. That's why I appreciate some of those men who have written books on parenting and things like that. Some familiar names might come to mind as I say this. And I've heard one say before that, even for those of us who have slipped up for many years, it's never too late. And if needed, you go to your grown son, if he's in his 20s already, doesn't matter. You say, you know what, son, I've slipped up with you. And I made some mistakes, and I've been a horrible representative of Christ in your life. But you know what? This is the right way. This is what you must do. And sometimes those kids appreciate. I want to say oftentimes, they appreciate the genuineness of their fathers. At least admitting to the fact that they've slipped up, and they weren't zealous for the Word of God when they were younger. I was raised in a time where it was not uncommon for parents to just drop their kids at Sunday school. Maybe you remember those days. Like they would sometimes my parents, they would just drop us, and you would hear the wheels spinning and they're gone. And I'm like, what do I do now? Okay, again, that's not what is in mind. We cannot even leave it only to the church, because sometimes we're tempted to do that. And yes, it takes a community to raise a child. That is certainly true. And there are many such examples as well, even of people who have had unbelieving parents who fell in the care of Bible-believing folk and who were showing the Lord Jesus. And of course that's true, right? But it's still not their sole responsibility. It starts with the parent. It starts with us. But I want to say it starts with the mom, those first few years of development. They're the ones who are sitting with the baby, cradling them first. And I'll tell you what, if you take me as an example, almost every child, I was so hesitant that when they first came out, I felt like I'm going to break them. It's like, you just hold them. Just hold them. Just keep on doing that. It looks amazing. And I'm standing there taking photos, and I'm just enjoying every moment. And then eventually, I muster all my courage and I take them for the first time. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. But it's true. It's true. They're in mom's care. Those first years, no caretaker can fulfill the role that the own biological mom can for those first few years of their formation or their formative years. Charles Spurgeon reminisces on the role that his own mom had in his life. Turned out pretty well for him, I think. Let me read to you. Charles Spurgeon, a tribute to his mom. It's a tribute to his godly mother. And this is what he has to say about the devotion of his mom. Quote, Children are often very reticent or quiet, right? They're very quiet about their parents. Often have spoken I with young lads about their souls, and they have told me they could not talk to their fathers upon such matters. Talking about salvation now, right? I know it was so with me. When I was under concern of my soul, the last persons I should have elected to speak to upon religion would be my parents. Not through want of love to them, nor absence of love on their part, but so it was. A strange feeling of diffidence pervades a seeking soul and drives it from its friends. Yet, I cannot tell how much I owe to the solemn words of my good mother. It was the custom on Sunday evenings, while we were yet little children, for her to stay at home with us, and then we sat round the table and read verse by verse, and she explained the scriptures to us. After that was done, then came the time of pleading. There was a little piece of Joseph Alleine, he wrote a tract, basically, but like if a Puritan writes a tract, it's a book, basically, all right, which was for evangelism, or of Baxter's call to the unconverted. And this was read with pointed observations made to each of us as we sat round the table. And the question was asked, how long it would be before we would think about our state? How long before we would seek the Lord? Then come a mother's prayer. And some of the words of that prayer we shall never forget, even when our hair is gray. I remember on one occasion her praying thus, "Now, Lord, if my children go on in their sins, it will not be from ignorance that they perish, and my soul must bear a swift witness against them at the day of judgment, if they lay not hold of Christ." That thought of a mother's bearing swift witness against me pierced my conscience and stirred my heart. That's the impact that his mother had on him. There's others like that. I believe John Wesley's mom, she had many children. Like over a dozen, I believe. And it got so hectic in the Wesley residence, she would at times just take her apron right in the middle of chaos, kids running everywhere. She would put the apron over her head and she would pray for each of them. Pray for their salvation. And you know how that panned out for John Wesley. Look, whether you agree with him theologically or not, right? We can agree. He was a godly man. Turn with me to Deuteronomy 6. Well-known passage. Also known as the Great Shema, or the Hear, O Israel. And this is now the Lord instructing Moses to instruct the nation that, look, before you enter the promised land, you got to know this is what you're going to have to do. If you're going to be a nation under God, if you're going to be a nation under Yahweh, and you're going to have to major on parenting. You're going to have to major in educating your children properly, telling them about me, being an example to them, as it involves your calling to be God's nation. And this is what the Lord says, verse 4. He says, "Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is one. You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart." As if to say, it'll have your affections. You'll be affectionate over it. The statutes of the Lord, the commandments of the Lord, right? It'll be on your heart. Verse 7, "You shall teach them," hint, "you shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as phylacteries between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." See, this is instruction from Yahweh, as if to say, in plain simple English, you're going to have to be serious about teaching them the way of God. That's what it boils down to. See how these things are reiterated over and over. First of all, it'll be on your heart. But you shall teach it diligently. To diligently teach, or to be diligent in anything, it means repetition. It means repeating things over and over and over. And I see that a lot in my house. I see it a lot, and without naming any names. Some of us, of our children, they get it a little bit slower than others. And I don't think it's some kind of a character flaw. That's not what I'm saying. It's just like, I was like that as a youngster. Hey, the fact that I made it this far is all God's grace. Okay? You would ask my teachers right now, is that what he's doing? They would not believe a word of it. But I thank the Lord for those repetitions I got over and over and over and over and over. And sometimes, yes, over and over. As they showed me their love. Because as human beings, we don't get it the first time. We don't. But with some repetition and some reiteration and some reinforcement, they might eventually get it by God's grace. We can't save them. Let me just throw that out there and just remind you, we can't save our children. And that's what, in one way, makes me feel a little bit like, I'm preaching on something where the jury is not out yet with our children. There are some of them that I believe might be saved already, but then there are some that I don't think they're saved yet. But here's something I do know, that God has to save them. God has to save them. But I'll tell you what, it certainly goes a long way if they have a good example and they have sturdy parents who point them to Christ on a daily basis. And again, I believe our moms have a vital role to play in that. You see, especially in today's day and age. Just go and read that book once you have the time. The War on Our Children. Are we just going to sit back these days and let our children from a tender young age be influenced by people who don't know their right from their left? Here's little ones who don't know their right from their left, who are being sent to those who don't know their right from their left. Look, it's a recipe for disaster. Go ahead, Paul.
It's like handing our children over to a bunch of pagans.
Yeah.
To bring them up, and then when they come back as little pagans, we wonder why.
Yeah. Wasn't it Vardy who said it like that? So you're sending them to the Romans every day. Why is it weird if they come back being like Romans? It's true. It's true. Thank you, Paul. Anybody else? Go ahead, Liesl.
For me, I think the highest accountability is that I need to stand before God one day, and He's going to ask me, what have you done with your children?
Yes.
And I don't want to stand there and say, oh, well,
Yeah.
I had to give it to someone else.
Yes.
Because of X, Y, and Z.
Right.
I want to be the good and faithful servant before Him then.
Absolutely. You're right. It's that very sobering thought of we're going to stand before God one day and give an account. Absolutely. But also the sobering thought of our kids having to stand before God one day. Right? And that's all of these are things that should motivate us. So yeah, all good thoughts. Absolutely. But I've got to make haste. So one last passage that I want to take us to here as we...
Sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
Take you back a little bit. I read the book by MacArthur. Yeah, he's touching on this issue. He said out bluntly that women should not be working,
Okay.
should be not in the corporate.
Okay.
And he's arguing that they're under the leadership, submitting. They're talking about submission. So when they say when they are out, they're under the authority of their bosses and all that stuff. So I want to, it challenged me. Yes, I agree with what he's saying. And also, I want to link with this challenging economy.
Yeah.
Yes, how can we, I'm not sure whether I've missed you, if you've touched that.
Okay.
How can we link
Okay.
this biblical
Yeah.
understanding with this challenging
Okay.
economy in
Okay.
terms of, because you'll find out some of the families, they do want to
Yes.
practice what
Okay.
the Bible says.
All right. Can I answer you by saying So it wasn't entirely false advertising. I am actually going to address that right at the end.
Okay.
So I'm going to get there. So if you don't mind me not answering you right now,
No problem.
but you are going to get the answer to your question
Thank you.
sort of towards the end. Okay. All right. And then lastly, Genesis 3:15, well-known passage, right? This is now the punishments that the Lord hands out. One of the punishments was to Satan. Remember, Satan, he was the one who tempted them. And then his is a true condemnation, by the way. The rest is not a condemnation. It's punishments. But Satan is the one honestly being condemned there. Because we know how it's going to end for him eventually one day, and there's no turning back from that. But Genesis 3:15 says there, the descendant of Eve will will crush the head of the serpent, but yet he will bruise his heel. Now, I know we're very quick, especially as theologians, as pastors, because we've been taught this at seminary. This is the proto-evangelion, right? This is the gospel before the gospel. This is indicative of what Jesus would eventually do when he hangs on the cross and he dies. Then he's the one who actually crushes the head of the serpent. And I know, but that's the long game, all right? But the short game was Seth. That's the short game. So I want to say there's a double fulfillment of this verse. In real children. It certainly wasn't Cain, it wasn't Abel. Abel was righteous, I suppose. He did. He brought a right sacrifice before the Lord. Look, we have very little data to go on there. But as it stands, it seems clear that the Lord chose Seth as the line to get through. And we don't know. It's simply not stated. But it stands to reason that after having been tempted by Satan, because she was the first one, and by the way, ladies, we're not holding you accountable to that anymore. Don't worry. All right, you're fine. You're safe in our company. But maybe after that, since she knew what happened and that the fall took place, and yes, Adam participated with her, maybe after that she was going to be twice as shy in how she goes about the world that God placed her in. First of all, they hid. That's true. They were unsure of what God's reaction was going to be, or they were afraid. They were extremely afraid, so they hid themselves. But as the Lord allowed them to live, you would think that they were not going to repeat that mistake again. Listening directly, to instruction from Satan, and it stands to reason that they would have instructed their children similarly. Yes, for Cain, it's doubtful that had a good effect in his life. But for Seth and Abel, it was different. Okay? And again, that could be the effect that a mom can have on her children. And maybe I'll throw this one out there as well. It could be that the Lord did not bless you with children for some or other reason. It could be, and that happens. But it's still the responsibility of our godly ladies to excel in these things. And you might not have children of your own, but you can help other ladies who have children of their own. And you can be a godly mother in a sense, a Christian godly mother in that sense, albeit you don't have any children of your own. And I think when we do that, we're being zealous for what the Lord has called our moms to do, and our young women and our older women. Now, as I promised, there's also the calling to be workers at home. So we not just looked at the cruciality of it or the crucialness of it. Let's now have a look at the calling to be workers at home. Because where exactly do we find the calling? It's one thing to say all these things, but where is it stated verbatim? So without further ado, go with me to Titus chapter 2. Titus chapter 2, small little letter in the New Testament. It's a letter of Paul. And it was addressed to Titus, who was an elder on the Isle of Crete. And just a little word on the Isle of Crete. It was a very debauched place. Greek culture reigning, the Greco-Roman way of doing things, society, whatever you want to call it. And so there was a lot of debauchery going on. A lot of, put it this way, Greek way of life. Let's eat and let's drink because tomorrow we perish. That kind of mindset that was alive and well on the Isle of Crete. And sadly, this started creeping into the churches there in Crete. And so Paul was warning Titus, and he said to him, look, no, we cannot be like the world. By the way, many of the Pauline disciples, epistles are like that. You know, it was motivated by certain kinds of heresies or unbiblical ways of doing things that started creeping into churches. John is the same. If you read the epistles that bear his name, so that's the context in which he writes the words that we're about to read, Titus 2. Let's just read from verse 1, because Paul in rapid fire now addresses different categories within the church, different age groups in a sense, and genders that he addresses here. And this is what he says. But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine. Older men ought to be temperate, dignified, sensible, sound in faith, in love, in perseverance. Older women, now this is where we pay attention. Older women, likewise, are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good. So let's just focus on that verse for a bit. He's basically laying the foundation for what he's about to say to older women, but something which involves younger women. But first of all, as I said, he lays the foundation, and the foundation is they got to be of solid character. They can't just be, casual about their role in the church. He mentions a few characteristics which they should exhibit in their lives. For instance, first of all, they should be reverent. By the way, this is the controlling behavior or characteristic. They should be reverent. Okay, so what will reverent ladies do? Well, they will not be malicious gossips to start off with. Maybe Paul knew that this is how he had to address it, because maybe sometimes ladies are tempted in this way. And not that guys cannot be malicious gossips. Guys can also be. But maybe this is something that he thought he needed to highlight. In a sense, this is something that was definitely true on the Isle of Crete. Not enslaved to much wine. All right, that's an obvious one. Because if they were enslaved to much wine, they will not be thinking clearly. And all the other characteristics will also fly out the back door. So it goes without saying, all right? Not a wine bibber, all right? They should be clear-thinking, level-headed people, the older ladies. By the way, nobody's saying you're old, okay? Just so you know. Clear-thinking, level-headed, mature. That's what is in mind here. Not given to dissipation. That's the point. But now he transitions to something that is very, very important to him. Teaching what is good, so that they may instruct the young women in sensibility, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sensible, pure, workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the word of God will not be slandered. See, that is something that older women can play a major role in. To lead younger ladies in this all-important task of pleasing the Lord and being pleasing to the Lord in what He's calling them to do. So first of all, what are the things that they need to teach? What are some of the things that they need to teach? First of all, love their husbands. Now I know already, but I'm not married, or there are some girls in our church who are not married. How do I present this to them? Well, still though, they should be in support of this. All of us. Doesn't matter. You can be a guy and be in support of this, even though you're not fulfilling this role. Are you with me? You're still promoting it. And that's the point. So it starts with love for the hubby. Are they loving their husbands? Are they caring for their husbands? Paul is literally saying, train the younger husband loving to be child loving in the Greek. If you were to literally translate the Greek here, it would be like saying, train the younger husband loving to be child loving. Interestingly. So the two go hand in glove, basically. But it starts with a love for the husband. There is a sense in which we can understand this as saying, this is what should come naturally for wives, for godly wives. Naturally. Taking care of their husbands. But as a result of that love, it goes without saying that they will love their children. and they will care for them. And they will do that which God expects. I think there is this contention in many Reformed circles that wives will necessarily be tempted to usurp the roles of their husbands because of what God said to Eve. Remember in Genesis 3:16, this is another verse just after 15 that we looked at, that your desire will be for your husband. Many have looked at that and said, that's this is why Sari keeps wanting to not do what I tell her to do. This is why, Sophie, keeps wanting to wear the pants. We use that as a euphemism for wanting to lead, right? And they would say that this is basically part of the fall. She is especially, I want to say, in a sense, hardwired to act that way and to usurp her husband's authority. But I want to say, no, not necessarily. There's a really good article, and it's an academic article that was written by Dr. Irv Business. Who of you know who Dr. Irv Business is? The Booz, he's known as at the Master Seminary. Yes, yeah, just a Hebrew guy, amazing Hebrew brain, but he's American. And he wrote an article on this passage, and he makes the point that this is not necessarily the kind of desire that is being spoken of here. And yet, in Reformed circles, it is basically preacher's gospel at times. That, so-and-so, because this is how they were doomed, in a sense, in Genesis 3, verse 16. And that's why she's acting this way. But rather, he reaches the conclusion that in the Hebrew, it is equally possible to understand that as an emotional desire for her husband. Okay? But I don't want to belabor this, and I don't want to stretch you too far by getting into this massive, big Hebrew discussion and inspection of the Hebrew language. But it does help to know that our wives are not necessarily hardwired to be subordinate to us or to, neglect their wifely duties or maternal duties or anything like that. It is not as a result of the fall. I want to say it is a general result of the fall. It's not a specific result. You get the difference. Some are saying, no, specifically, it's a result of the fall. I say, no, because she's a sinner like me. That's why. I'm not specifically more tempted to be impatient, for instance. I can be an impatient person at times. I can be an unkind person at times, but it's not because of it being written in the fabric of the post-fall world that we live in. All right? Or the fallen world that we live in. I'm talking about the acts of the fall. Sorry, that's why I said that. No, in general, sinners who must be called to uphold this in their lives. And that's why Paul does the same. All right? And he does it quite nonchalant, right? Let them love their husbands, or let the older woman instruct the younger woman in sensibility to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sensible, pure workers at home. Very, very important. So just a look here at self-controlled and pure. In some of your translations, it'll say self-controlled. I think the ESV says self-controlled. In the LSB, which is what I have, it says sensible and pure. But whichever you slice it, I think the meaning is similar, right? But I like the rendition of to be self-controlled, because often when these characteristics or when these traits are not being lived out, it is the result of lack of self-control. It is. It can be. It certainly was the case of some ladies on the Isle of Crete. In fact, historically, it is known that some of those who did talk about Christ and expressed faith in him and eventually was absorbed in some of these churches on the Isle of Crete, some of them got involved in dissipation, some of these ladies. And some of them did become heavy drinkers and lacked discretion. And, yes, you've guessed it, lacked self-control. About Cretan women in general, they were at the forefront or the cutting edge of Roman life, if you didn't know that. In other words, it was seen as a cultural hotbed for Roman ideals, the Isle of Crete. This translated into the challenging of traditions and norms that were culturally held. Like, for instance, male leadership and women's submission. That was something that was already challenged on the Isle of Crete 1,900 odd years ago. Okay, so Betty Friedan, she's a Betty come lately, right? Speaking of the so-called emancipation of women, it led to a whole new set of morality. The history of Crete and its challenging of traditional norms is what made the women of this island particularly receptive to the avant-garde ideals of the Roman woman. And by the way, the Roman woman, it was a different kind of woman. It was. You know, the Roman Empire, they did some good things. For instance, they built roads. They gave the world an amazing legal system and a few other things. Okay? But there are some negative things that the Romans also gave us. And amongst others, it's this challenging of the traditional roles. Male leadership, woman submission. Roman ladies had already started to challenge those things. Okay. To be pure means to be, they need to be chaste. And then lastly, workers at home. Now this is, I want to say, the one that is mainly challenged in our day and age, you know, because some evangelical women would even say, look, I can be a child of God, I can be a woman of God, and work 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 and still do everything that the Lord requires of me. But I think, again, contextually, the way in which these words or these injunctions reach us, I don't think it is possible. Honestly, I don't think. Look, something is going to give. Something's going to give, and it's going to be a horrible crash or an explosion along the way. But actually, it's not going to be that obvious. But you'll just one day wake up, and you'll realize, my kids don't think like me, and I wonder why. And you know, they don't have a desire for the Word of God like I do, and they. You know, it's like pulling teeth to get them to go to church. And all of these can be the result of a mom who was not present in their lives. And that's what is in mind with being workers at home. I'll get to some implications of this or maybe some exclusions to this in some way or another. But as it stands, I think the phrase is unavoidable. It means that a married woman's role is to emphasize the home. That's what it boils down to. And the boiling of eggs. Okay? It comes down to the home being the hub. You know, I mentioned the nuclear family. In the nuclear family, the house is right there in the center of everything. The household. And so what Paul is doing here, he's calling women, he is holding them accountable to be there in the very heart of that incubator called the home, where we have this once in a lifetime opportunity to impress upon our children's eternity, the fear of God, and eternal judgment for that matter. Once in a lifetime opportunity. Some might say, oh, well, Lönngren, you know, that's easy for you to say, but you know, and some of these questions can be easily asked or answered, but I'll just read them out to you anyways. Some might say, yeah, but I'm not married and I don't have any children, so you know, should I still do that? But I'll say, okay, you may not be married, but are you supporting those who are? Because again, you should be of the same mind as them, just as elders of a church should be in support of this and preach these things. You might not have children. You know, should I just be sitting at home twiddling my thumbs? No, I don't think so. There's many ways in which Christian women who never became mothers can be active in the church and help the younger ladies, married ladies who are moms, help them, encouraging them to live up to this calling in their lives. I don't have kids yet. Should I just sit at home? What should I do? Well, I think it goes without saying that the household still retains the major focus for any Christian wife. You turn with me to 1 Timothy 5:13. 1 Timothy 5. What does Paul say? Sorry, I'm in 2 Timothy. How much time do I have left? About 5 minutes, eh? Woo! Okay, it's not going to happen. Let's see. 1 Timothy 5:13. He's talking here about young widows. But interestingly, listen what he says. 1 Timothy 5:13. And at the same time, they also learn to be idle, the young widows. It was not uncommon for young ladies to lose their husbands because wars were fought like a pastime. It was like the hobby of the ancient world. Okay, they become idle as they go around from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things not proper to mention. Therefore, I want younger widows to get married, bear children, and then guess what? Keep house. What does it say in another translation?
Manage the house.
Manage the house. You see, but that's become an anathema, even in evangelicalism. It's who was it who preached this morning who's like, and then he said it silent, wwhatever it was that he said. It was quite humorous. Steve, what was he saying? I forget.
Spanking.
Yeah. And then, you almost feel like you have to read this, like in that way, Therefore, I want the younger widows to get married, bear children, and give them enemy no opportunity for. Keep house. Say it loud. Say it clear. They got to keep house. That's what they got to do. And there's no way you can keep the house if you're out of the house. You can't do it. You can't keep the house like this and one hand there. It's not possible. Because something is going to give. Something is going to implode along the way. Whether you're a PhD in science or whatever, you cannot have your cake and eat it. I'm sorry, ladies. And that's why I want to explain it this way. Honestly, what the Lord is calling you to is to be conscripted in His army. That's my third point. He's calling you like you're a soldier in His army. That's a very valuable illustration here. Something that I don't really know because I missed the army by like a few years. My brother had to go because it was still compulsory, to go to the army in this country some years ago. But I do know that during that first year, that boot camp, there were guys there who were brain surgeons, guys who were lawyers before they were called to the army. And that's how it works. When your country needs you, and let's say and not that I'm referring to any recent war that South Africa fought in, that's certainly not the case. But either way you slice it, when your country is engaged in war, doesn't matter who you are, if you are able-bodied, you can be a rocket scientist, maybe especially because you're a rocket scientist, they're going to call you, okay? But whatever it is that you're doing, you are going to be serving your country until the war is done. You're going to be serving your country. All the way from the bankers who are able-bodied to the street sweepers. That's what made war so unique, because you had guys lying in trenches next to each other who were from totally different walks of life. But yet they were there for the same cause. Okay, ladies, that's what the Lord is calling you to. Okay, you might be the most talented musician in the world. You might be gifted beyond belief in mathematics or whatever it is. But the moment you become a mother, especially, I want to say, you're conscripted. You're conscripted to the home. Because it's a war. It's an absolute war for their souls. And you do not want to leave it up to Ricky up the road. Okay. Yeah, no, you don't want to leave it up to her. I don't know her personally. Okay. If there is a Ricky up the road, I'm in trouble. Okay. Okay. Again, just cut that out, please, Dave. Okay. So you are conscripted in God's army. All right. And here's how I'm going to motivate this. But I'm going to motivate it from childbearing. Go to 1 Timothy 2 quickly. Because we are basically out of time already, but I have to land the ship first. 1 Timothy 2. 14 to 15. And it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into trespass. But she will be saved through the bearing of children if they continue in faith and love and sanctification with self-restraint. Now, again, there's many ways in which this has been interpreted, but let me just debunk a few ones before I get into the true meaning. What saved is referring to here is obviously not salvific. He's not saying that she gets saved by that, like literally, like her salvation is dependent on her having children. Maybe there are cults in the world who...
I'm taking notes. I'm preaching on this one next week.
Good, brother. Okay, so that's obviously not what is in mind here. But here's the obvious explanation. What he is saying is that there is the opportunity to be presented in a respectful light again. That's honestly what is in mind in the Greek language that is employed here. Because yes, it is true, the woman gave in to Satan. And that's what Paul said a verse earlier, did he not? He's not blaming her for that. But he is saying, perhaps through childbearing and being that person, that first person who is on the job with the children, she can save some face. And she can earn respect for doing that. Even though, historically, it is true, the first mother, the mother of all, gave in. Right? Are you with me? Tell me if you're not with me. If this is not making sense. He's saying she can earn respect of her husband by doing this in some way. She can earn the respect of the greater church community if she is zealous at that. And yes, I know some will not be pregnant. I understand that. And yes, that is why adoption is forever an opportunity. It is. It's also not for everyone. I understand that. But especially through childbearing and through the rearing of children, a woman can really show her stuff. She can show what she's made of. And I'll tell you, just from my own personal experience, my wife has been invaluable in this process thus far. She has. In fact, I should have built my entire sermon just off of her, because she is such a model to me of godliness and of commitment to our children from the very get-go, from the moment they said, she's been there, and she has been on the job with them. And I'm not saying there's not been any challenges. Of course there's been challenges, many. And it's as they get older that the challenges get more and more and more. And I want to say that the challenges become more and more intelligent, right? When they're yay high, it's like it's easy to see them in their tracks and say, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Just teasing, all right? But as they get older, they get more wily and clever, and I thank the Lord that my wife has been there. She's been there, and she understands this. She honestly does. Unlike the Roman woman of the time, but also I want to say unlike the Roman evangelicals that can be in our midst today. We got to look out for this. We really do. It's not just us in Stellenbosch. We're a church for Stellenbosch. Of course, it'll be sort of maybe to a heightened degree where we are. It's an academic town. It's a very ambitious place. I understand that. But the same can be true where the Lord has you, whether it be Everglen Baptist or maybe the Baptist church down the road or wherever else. You can help out with this. Husbands and wives can help out with this. One last thing I'll say before we get to our last point. Yesterday on the highway, it was pouring rain, but it was like that sideways rain, and it was just wind, and my little car was snaking like this. I've not experienced anything like it. And a guy in a scooter, I kid you not, came past me. A scooter, people, like a Vespa. It must be like half horsepower or something. And he was just pumping it. And he's like leaning like this in the wind. And it dawned on me. So first thing I'm asking, why would you want to be on a motorbike? Why would you want to be on two wheels right now? In traffic, on the highway. And it is just havoc everywhere. And it dawned on me that this guy's trying to beat the traffic. That's what he's doing. He's weaving through the traffic to get to work on time. And that became an instant illustration to me. You see, that's a classic example where the end is justified by the means. If you understand what I'm saying, it's the way that he chose to get to his desired result is justified in a sense. I don't think to myself, no, I don't think so. Just like say something to the boss or something. But you are not going to find me on a Vespa on the N1 in traffic, and it's rain and it's wind. But sadly, that's what some women are doing. This is helpful. That's what some women are doing. They're choosing a course of action because they see some kind of reward in the distance. But the way they have chosen to get there is dicey. It's dicey. We're conscripted. Our moms are conscripted. Our wives are conscripted. And then lastly, the commendation of being workers at home. And there's no better not condemnation, commendation than Proverbs 31. Quickly turn there with me. That's what I'll end with. If there's ever been a commendation of a godly woman, it is Proverbs 31. And some say this is an ode to, is it his great-grandmother, Ruth Solomon, perhaps, that he was referring to. It's not impossible. But in my Bible, it is a mother's oracle. Okay. No, sorry, I lie. A woman who fears Yahweh. That's the heading in my Bible, verse 10 on. An excellent wife. Right? There's a noble wife. An amazing wife. That's what we're talking about. An excellent wife. Who can find? For her worth is far above pearls. You see how the Lord commends an excellent wife? The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She deals bountifully with him for good and not evil all the days of her life. And is she just sitting at home twiddling her thumbs? No, right? No, she searches for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She's like merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. This is interesting, right? And she rises while it is still night and gives food to her household and a portion to her young woman. She makes plans for a field and buys it. From the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. As if to say she's not idle and she can even be industrious. We often have this picture of a homemaker as, like that's it. That's all she's conscripted to. But I found an interesting article. There's no time to read it to you right now. Of stay-at-home moms who started multi-million-dollar companies from home without it interfering in parenthood, right? Because they can be industrious. They can plant a vineyard, and they can bring in money even in certain ways without neglecting her family. She girds herself, verse 17, with strength and makes her arms strong. She senses that her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out at night. She stretches out her hand to the distaff, and her hands hold fast the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor, and she stretches out her hands to the needy. Skipping ahead, she makes coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits with the elders of the land. Skipping on, I love this. I often would say this to my children whenever my wife walks into the rooms. Her children rise up and bless her. I would say, bless your mother. Right? Go and give her a hug. Go bless her, because this woman, she is investing a lot in you. And she deserves it. And she's conscripted in our Lord's army to do that. This is what I'll end with. Any questions? Any comments? No tomatoes. You are adjourned if no questions. Anything, honestly. Sorry, I did go over time, but I'm done. Cool. Great. So now go out and live that way. Thank you. Let me pray. Sorry, before you go. Lord, thank you for this time that we could be together. Lord, thank you that we could survey this topic, this all-important topic of our moms, our wives, and being workers at home. I pray, Lord, that we as the church will rally around our wives and our moms. And Lord, may we encourage them to excel at this all the more. In Jesus' precious name, we pray all these things. Amen. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.